Human carries the alien girl through burning fog, and the alien girl says the fog bent around his heartbeat. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Jason held Lyra close as they trudged through the dense, fiery fog that enveloped the land. The air was thick, burning with an intensity that seemed to twist the very atmosphere itself. He could feel her breath against his chest, steady but faint, her skin cool under his touch despite the heat. As they moved forward, the fog seemed to fight them, curling and twisting around their bodies like an invisible hand pushing back. But Jason wouldn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. Not when she was depending on him. Lyra, though an alien to Earth, was unlike anything Jason had ever known. She wasn't from here, and yet, she felt more connected to him than anyone he'd ever met. As they walked, he noticed her gaze was fixed ahead, but her eyes held a depth that spoke of faraway places, of things he could never understand. The fog parted briefly, just enough for Jason to see the outline of what was ahead, a rocky cliff, a pathway that led to what might be safety, or perhaps just another illusion. Every step they took felt like an eternity. The fog seemed endless, wrapping them in its fiery embrace, as if it was alive. It bent and twisted, curling around them like it was reacting to their every move. Jason, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling winds. Can you feel it? The fog, it's reacting to you. Jason paused for a moment, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? He asked, his voice tight. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She just stared into the fog, as if searching for something. Her pale skin glowed faintly in the dim light, her hair shifting with the wind. Then, with a soft exhale, she spoke again. It bends around your heartbeat, she said. The rhythm of your pulse, it guides the fog. It understands you. Jason's heart skipped a beat. Could it be true? Was the fog somehow connected to him? To them? He shook his head, trying to shake off the surreal feeling creeping over him. That's insane, he muttered. It can't be. But Lyra simply shook her head, her expression unreadable. It's not insane, Jason. I can feel it too. The fog reacts to your presence, to your every breath. It's alive, in a way. The weight of her words settled over him, heavy and strange. They couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. With renewed determination, Jason pressed forward, keeping his grip on Lyra firm as they moved through the burning fog, feeling its heat and its strange, magnetic pull around them. Every step felt like a battle, not just with the elements, but with something deeper, something he couldn't quite grasp. The fog was more than just a barrier. It was something else entirely. Something alive. And somehow, it was tethered to them. To him. And to her. The heat from the burning fog pressed in around them like a living thing, shifting with every step they took. Jason could feel it, the strange pressure in the air, the way it seemed to tighten around his chest with each breath. He glanced down at Lyra, her face serene despite the chaos around them. Her eyes, though, were distant, focused on something far beyond the fog. Jason wanted to ask her more about the fog, about what she meant when she said it was reacting to him. But for now, he couldn't afford to stop. Every second they wasted could be the one that took them further from safety. The fog swirled around their feet, burning the ground beneath them. It crackled with energy, its heat almost unbearable, yet it didn't seem to touch them in the same way it should have. It was as though the fog respected their presence, or perhaps feared it. The rhythm of Jason's heartbeat, as Lyra had said, seemed to guide them through the maze of flames and smoke. The further they went, the more the fog bent and twisted in response to his pulse. It was unnerving, but he pushed the thought aside. Are we getting closer? Jason asked, his voice strained but steady. Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. Yes, she whispered. Just a little further. There's a safe place ahead. Her words were almost lost in the sound of the winds whipping through the fog, but Jason caught them. He could feel her trust in him, in his ability to get them through this. The weight of that trust settled heavily on his shoulders, but he didn't falter. He couldn't. The fog seemed to open up just a little ahead, giving Jason a glimpse of what lay beyond it. The sight of it was enough to make his heart race. A narrow path appeared, leading up to a high cliff that was shrouded in mist. It looked like the edge of the world, the kind of place that only existed in stories. That's it, Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're almost there. Jason could see the determination in her eyes, the same resolve that drove him forward. They kept moving, pushing through the fog, and as they did, something strange happened. The fog, which had been so oppressive, seemed to shift around them, becoming almost protective. It was as if the very air had softened, the heat fading just enough to make their journey bearable. For a moment, Jason dared to believe they might actually make it out. He glanced down at Lyra again, her face lit by the faint glow of the fog. How are you doing? He asked quietly, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace around them. She gave him a small, reassuring smile, though her eyes still held that faraway look. I'm okay, she said softly. Just, keep going. Jason nodded and pushed forward, his every step guided by the rhythm of his heartbeat and the strange, inexplicable connection between them. As they neared the cliff, Jason could feel the fog pulling back, almost as if it were giving them the space they needed. It was as though they had earned this moment, as though the fog had sensed their determination and decided to grant them a brief reprieve. The edge of the cliff was close now, just a few more steps, but the weight of the journey still lingered in the air. Jason knew that the hardest part wasn't over yet. They had made it this far, but the true test awaited them on the other side of the fog. We're almost there, Jason murmured, more to himself than to Lyra. Stay with me. Lyra's hand tightened around his arm, and for the first time since they had entered the fog, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. I'm with you, she said, her voice steady. Together, they took the final steps toward the edge, the fog now receding behind them as if it had granted them passage. But as they stepped into the clearing, Jason knew that whatever awaited them would not be the end of their journey. It was only the beginning. The fog had almost completely receded behind them now, leaving only the faintest trace of its fiery heat in the air. Jason and Lyra stood on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the vast expanse that lay beyond. The world before them was different, clearer, more alive. The trees at the base of the cliff were swaying gently in the wind, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly glow, and the sky above was an impossible shade of blue. Jason could hardly believe what he was seeing. After everything they had just endured, this place felt almost unreal, as though they had crossed into another realm entirely. The air was fresh here, not burning, but cool, crisp, and full of life. It was a relief, a momentary break from the suffocating fog that had plagued them for so long. But Jason knew they couldn't relax just yet. They were far from safe. Is this it? Jason asked, his voice still low, unsure if he had crossed into something that was truly safe or if it was merely another illusion. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, her eyes scanning the horizon. Then, she nodded slowly. Yes, she said quietly. This is the place. The place I was looking for. Jason turned to look at her, a mixture of relief and confusion on his face. But, why here? What is this place? Lyra finally looked at him, her expression softening. It's a sanctuary, she said. For me. For others like me. Jason raised an eyebrow, his heart beating faster. Others like you? He asked. Lyra nodded. I told you before, I'm not from here. This world isn't mine. But it's the only place where I can be safe. Where others from my kind can find refuge. Jason's mind raced as he processed her words. He had known Lyra was different, but hearing her speak so openly about her origins made the reality of it all sink in. She was an alien, a being from another world, and she had been running from something. Something she was now hoping to find in this place. And you think you'll find it here? Jason asked. Lyra seemed to consider his question for a moment before answering. I don't know, she said softly. But I have to try. I've come too far to give up now. Jason looked out at the vast landscape before them. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful to believe, but he knew one thing for certain, they couldn't stay here forever. There were still questions left unanswered, dangers yet to be faced. The fog might be gone, but that didn't mean they were safe. He turned back to Lyra, his gaze steady. Then we'll figure it out together, he said, his voice filled with determination. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time since they had met, she allowed herself to relax, just a little. Thank you, she whispered. I couldn't do this without you. Jason didn't respond right away. He just gave her a small nod, feeling the weight of the moment. There was so much uncertainty ahead, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel so alone. They stood there for a while, side by side, staring out at the strange new world before them. It was a world full of possibilities, but also one full of unknowns. Jason didn't know what was waiting for them next, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, they would face it together. The landscape around them seemed to stretch on forever, a world that was both foreign and familiar at the same time. Jason felt a sense of awe as he took in the beauty of the place, but it wasn't long before that feeling was replaced by the reality of their situation. There was still so much unknown, so much to figure out. Lyra stood silently beside him, her eyes fixed on the horizon, as if searching for something in the distance. Jason could see the weight of her thoughts, the uncertainty that lingered even in this place of supposed safety. Do you think we're really safe here? Jason asked, his voice quiet but filled with concern. Lyra turned to look at him, her expression soft but resolute. I don't know, she admitted. This place isn't what I thought it would be. But it's the only chance I have. And we have to take it. Jason nodded, understanding more than he wanted to. She had come so far, through so much, and this was the one place she believed could give her some peace. But even here, in the midst of what should have been a sanctuary, there were no guarantees. What do we do now? Jason asked, his voice carrying the weight of their journey. Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze returning to the landscape before them. We find others. There are others like me, and they'll be here, somewhere. Her voice was steady, but Jason could hear the undercurrent of doubt in her words. How long had she been searching for these others? How much had she sacrificed to find them? Jason could only imagine. And if we don't find them, he asked. What then? Lyra hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to him before she spoke. I don't know, she said softly. But I can't stop looking. I can't give up now. Jason watched her, feeling the weight of her determination settle in his chest. He knew she wasn't just searching for people, she was searching for something deeper, something that had kept her going through everything. Maybe it was a place to belong, or maybe it was something more than that. We'll find them, Jason said, his voice full of conviction. I'll help you. Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes softening. For a brief moment it was as if the world around them faded, and it was just the two of them, standing together in this strange, new world. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't think I could do this alone. Jason smiled faintly, his heart heavy with the weight of their shared journey. You're not alone, he replied. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation settle in. The world was vast, full of possibilities, but also full of dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. Still, Jason felt a sense of purpose now. He had a role to play in this, and he wasn't going to back down. "Let's go," he said after a moment, his tone resolute. "We have a long road ahead of us." Lyra nodded, and together, they began to move forward, into the unknown, with only the faintest glimmer of hope to guide them. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They walked for hours, the landscape around them slowly shifting as they moved deeper into the unknown. The path was not clear, the terrain uneven and rough, but they kept going, each step feeling like a small victory. Jason could feel the weight of the journey pressing on him, but he refused to slow down. He had a promise to keep. Lyra walked beside him, her pace steady, but her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Jason could tell she was still on edge, still searching for something, someone, among the distant hills and strange, glowing trees. He didn't ask her to explain more. He knew she would when she was ready. The further they went, the more Jason began to notice the oddities of this world. The sky, though beautiful, seemed almost too perfect, the clouds impossibly fluffy, like something out of a dream. The air, despite its freshness, had an unnatural stillness to it. Even the trees, with their shimmering leaves, seemed to pulse with a quiet energy that Jason couldn't quite place. It was like the world itself was alive in a way that he had never experienced before. "Are we close?" Jason asked after a while, breaking the silence between them. Lyra paused, looking around before turning her gaze back to him. "I think so," she said, her voice soft but filled with certainty. "They're here. I can feel them." Jason nodded, though he wasn't sure what to make of her words. He had come to understand that Lyra's senses were sharper than his, more attuned to this world. She could sense things he couldn't even begin to understand. They kept walking, and soon, they reached a clearing, a small valley surrounded by strange rock formations. The air here was different, heavier with the scent of something he couldn't identify. The ground beneath their feet was soft, like moss, but it glowed faintly in the moonlight. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice a whisper, as if she were afraid to disturb the quiet of the place. Jason looked around, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. There was nothing threatening here, no fog, no danger, just an overwhelming sense of peace. But it felt wrong. The peace here was too still, too perfect. It didn't feel like the calm that came after a storm. It felt like a calm that had always been. "Are you sure this is the place?" Jason asked, his instincts prickling. Lyra nodded, though her expression was unreadable. "Yes. This is where they're waiting. This is where they've been waiting for me." Jason stood there for a moment, considering her words. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew that whatever it was, they couldn't turn back now. There was no way back. They had come this far together, and there was no other choice but to move forward. "Okay," Jason said, his voice steady. "Let's find them." They stepped into the clearing, the ground soft beneath their feet. Jason's heart was pounding in his chest as he followed Lyra, the quiet hum of the world around them seeming to grow louder with each passing moment. He didn't know what they would find here, but he was ready to face it. Together. The clearing was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that settled deep into the bones. Jason could feel his heart rate picking up as they moved deeper into the valley, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Lyra walked ahead, her eyes scanning the surroundings, her movements fluid but tense. Jason stayed close behind her, his senses on high alert. There was something unsettling about this place, something that tugged at him like an invisible thread. The air smelled faintly of something sweet, like flowers in bloom, but it wasn't a scent that calmed him. It made him more aware of the world around him, like a premonition waiting to unfold. They moved between the towering rock formations, the glow of the ground beneath them casting an unnatural light on the scene. The landscape was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. It felt almost artificial, as if it were crafted by someone's hand. But there was no one in sight. "They should be here," Lyra said, her voice soft, but her words carried a weight that echoed in the stillness. Jason looked around, trying to sense something, anything, that would tell him where they were. The trees around them seemed to sway ever so slightly, their glowing leaves trembling in the windless air. It was as if the entire place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Are they hiding?" Jason asked. His voice barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would disrupt the delicate balance of the moment. Lyra stopped and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Not hiding," she said quietly. "They're waiting." Jason could feel a chill creeping up his spine. He didn't like the sound of that. "Waiting for what?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Lyra's gaze shifted to the horizon, her eyes distant. "For me," she said, the words carrying a quiet sorrow. "For us." Jason wanted to ask more, but something in Lyra's tone told him it wasn't the right time. They stood in silence for a moment, the quiet of the place pressing in on them. Jason could feel his pulse quickening, the weight of the unknown settling in his chest. Something was about to change. The air grew heavier, thick with anticipation. Just as Jason was about to speak again, a soft light appeared in the distance, flickering like a star. It grew brighter with each passing second, and then, like a ripple in the air, it began to take shape. Figures slowly emerged from the glow, their forms hazy at first, but then they became clearer. The beings were unlike anything Jason had ever seen. They were tall, their skin shimmering in the soft light, their eyes glowing with an inner fire. Their presence was imposing, yet peaceful. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he watched them move toward them, their steps almost floating above the ground. Lyra stepped forward, her face softening as she approached them. The beings did not speak, but their gaze was intense, their eyes locked on Lyra with an almost knowing look. Jason remained still, unsure of what to do, but he couldn't look away. There was something about their presence that made him feel both small and connected to something greater. As Lyra reached the center of the group, one of the beings extended a hand, its fingers elongated and graceful. Lyra placed her hand in theirs, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The world around them held its breath. Jason could feel a pulse, not from his own body, but from the beings, from the very air itself. It was as if the entire valley had come alive, vibrating with a quiet hum that resonated deep within him. Lyra closed her eyes, her expression peaceful, and for a brief moment, Jason saw something shift in her. The tension in her shoulders relaxed, the sadness in her eyes fading into something lighter, something like hope. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew it was something important. This was the moment she had been searching for. And as he watched her, he realized that he was part of it too. Whatever this was, it was more than just her journey. It was their journey. Together. The beings around Lyra stood perfectly still, their eyes never leaving her as if waiting for something, or perhaps, remembering something long past. Jason could feel the hum of energy in the air, thick and vibrating as though the ground itself was alive, responding to their presence. Lyra's hand rested gently in the being's elongated fingers, her face serene, but the slight tremor in her hand betrayed the depth of her emotions. Jason watched her, his heart heavy, but also filled with awe. There was something about this moment that felt timeless, like it belonged to another world, another reality. The beings were silent, but their presence was enough to speak volumes. They seemed to radiate an ancient wisdom, a quiet understanding that Jason couldn't quite grasp. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why were they here? Why had Lyra led them to this place? His gaze moved to the beings again, their faces unreadable but somehow comforting, as if they were offering something more than just answers. It was like they were showing Lyra something deep within herself, something she had been searching for all along. Lyra closed her eyes, her breath steady, but Jason could see the change in her. The sadness that had lingered in her eyes for so long seemed to melt away, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. She wasn't just standing with these beings, she was becoming one with them, connected in a way Jason couldn't explain. A soft light began to radiate from her, from the place where her hand touched the beings, spreading like a ripple across the valley. The air thickened with the glow, and Jason felt the weight of the moment settle deeper into his chest. He wanted to move forward, to understand what was happening, but he didn't know how to interrupt this sacred moment. It was as if time had slowed around them, allowing them to exist in this space between the present and the unknown. The ground beneath Jason's feet seemed to pulse, its vibrations matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. It felt as though everything was in perfect harmony, and yet, there was still so much left unsaid. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time since Jason had met her, she looked truly whole. She wasn't just the girl from another world, she was something more, something greater. She was part of something vast, something timeless. And in that moment, Jason realized that he too was a part of it. The beings seemed to acknowledge him, their gazes softening, as if inviting him into their understanding, into the truth of this place. But Jason didn't know if he was ready for that truth. The idea of becoming one with this mysterious energy, of understanding it fully, terrified him. And yet, there was a strange pull inside him, a desire to understand more, to go deeper. Lyra turned to him, her eyes locking with his, and for a moment, it felt as though no words were needed. She had found what she was looking for, but Jason wasn't sure if he had found his place in all of this. He stepped closer, his mind still racing, but something in the air told him that they had crossed into a new phase of their journey. This wasn't the end, but it was a turning point. Lyra spoke then, her voice soft but sure. "It's time," she said, her gaze never leaving his. "We're not alone anymore." Jason felt the weight of her words, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if it was the right choice to make. But whatever came next, he knew that they would face it together. The air around them shifted, the quiet hum that had filled the space now growing louder, more insistent. Jason felt it in his bones, a vibration that resonated with something deep within him, something primal. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him, and for a moment, the weight of their shared journey settled between them, unspoken but understood. "What happens now?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra took a slow breath, her eyes flickering to the beings that surrounded them, their forms still and glowing. "We wait," she said quietly. "For the next step." Jason nodded, though uncertainty tugged at him. He wasn't sure what the next step meant. They had come so far, faced so many dangers, but now it felt like they were standing at the edge of something even bigger, something they couldn't see yet. The beings around them remained silent, but their presence felt different now. Less distant, more connected. It was as if they were no longer simply observing, they were part of the moment, part of the journey. Lyra seemed to sense the change, her posture relaxing slightly, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Jason watched her, noticing how the light from the beings seemed to reflect in her eyes, giving them an almost ethereal glow. She wasn't the same person he had met at the edge of the fog. There was something different about her now. Something more confident, more grounded. "You're not the same," Jason said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Lyra turned to him, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Neither are you," she replied softly. Jason felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He hadn't realized it until now, but the journey they had shared, the trials they had faced together, had changed him too. He wasn't the person who had stepped into that fog months ago, uncertain and alone. He had grown. They had both grown. "How do you feel?" Jason asked, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. Lyra's smile widened slightly, though her expression remained thoughtful. "I feel whole," she said, the words laced with a quiet awe. "For the first time, I feel like I belong." Jason's heart swelled at her answer, a mix of relief and understanding flooding through him. He didn't fully understand everything that had happened here, but he knew one thing for sure. This place, this moment, had been meant for her. And now, it was meant for both of them. They had found something here. They had found a connection, something that reached beyond words, beyond the fog, beyond the unknown. "I'm glad you're here," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. Lyra met his gaze, her eyes bright with something Jason couldn't name. "I'm glad you're with me," she whispered. The words hung between them, a promise that stretched beyond the present moment, beyond this strange world they had found themselves in. Jason didn't know what the future held. But he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the light from the beings grew brighter, surrounding them in a soft, peaceful glow, Jason reached out, taking Lyra's hand in his. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. Whatever path lay ahead, they were no longer walking it alone. The light around them continued to pulse, growing softer and warmer as it enveloped Jason and Lyra in its calming glow. The beings who had once appeared so distant now felt like part of the fabric of the world itself, their presence steady and reassuring. Jason could feel his pulse slow, his mind settling into a quiet rhythm that matched the beat of the valley around him. He glanced at Lyra, her eyes still fixed on the beings, and for the first time, he saw her completely at peace. There were no more doubts in her eyes, no more fear or uncertainty. This was where she was meant to be. This was where they were meant to be. "What now?" Jason asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper in the thick silence that filled the air. Lyra turned to face him, her expression filled with something he could not quite name, an emotion that was both soft and unyielding, like the calm after a storm. "Now we move forward," she replied, her voice steady and sure. "Together." Jason nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle within him. He wasn't sure what the future would look like. He didn't know what the world beyond the valley held, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were no longer alone. They had each other. And whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one. Lyra's hand, warm and steady, found his once again. The simple touch sent a wave of reassurance through him. No words were needed now. Together, they stood, connected not just by their journey but by something deeper, something that had bound them in ways neither of them fully understood. The beings around them did not speak, but their presence was like a quiet song, humming in the background of the world. The air shifted again, the pulse of the land growing stronger, as though something was coming to life, something that had been dormant for a long time. The ground beneath Jason's feet trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear that filled him now. It was a sense of anticipation, like the first breath after a long exhale. The world was changing, and they were part of it. Lyra gave him a gentle smile, her eyes glowing softly in the fading light. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice a soft promise. Jason met her gaze, his own heart swelling with a mixture of hope and determination. "I know," he said, his voice low but full of certainty. Together, they turned toward the horizon, toward the unknown that awaited them, knowing that no matter what it held, they would walk through it side by side. As the last of the light from the beings faded, the valley was left in a peaceful stillness, the air thick with possibility. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Jason felt ready. They were ready. And whatever came next, they would face it together.